All right, good morning, Greg. Hitting this one early morning before the holiday break coming up. So we're getting towards that time of the end of the year. And today we've got an interesting sort of conversation and some things that we want to bring up
Yeah.
about something that we talk about in class about orientation and functional field of view. And I'll explain what it is in a minute. But the goal is to kind of have a larger kind of sociological understanding of how things affect us as humans. So for this one, what I'll do is I'll kind of run through the overall kind of overview of what we're going to be talking about, and then we'll get into some of the details. And I'll go to you for that to kind of walk us through from sort of, I guess, tactical to strategic or
Yeah.
micro to macro, however we want to do it. So small to big, I guess is the simplest way to put it. But so here's the thing that we're doing. So today we're discussing a seemingly simple concept that we talk about during training as well as on the show, and that's orientation. So we're going to explain what we mean by orientation, get into things like functional field of view and perception. And while the science is fascinating, it's also a window into how we navigate and adapt, keyword there, in everyday life. From the moment we open our eyes, our brains engage in a complex automatic process called sense making. It's how we extract meaning from the flood of sensory input that surrounds us. So, our five senses sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste those are our primary tools for gathering environmental data. There's no sixth sense, right? Instead, it's our cognitive power lies in how we organize, interpret, and act on this sensory information. So visual perception plays a central role here. We rely on vision guided by our actions, using what we see to make decisions based on experience and expectation, enabling us to make rapid decisions. So this is where the concept of field of view comes in, the portion of our visual field where we can effectively process information without moving our eyes. So the central vision about fine details. But functional field of view isn't static, it's dynamic, right? It's shaped by our orientation in space, and orientation aligns our senses with our intended action, guiding us toward meaningful targets while filtering out distractions. I'm going to get into that process and what that means and how that works and how it can go wrong sometimes, but it's a life-saving mechanism in high-stakes scenarios where rapid assessment is critical. So today we'll dissect that stuff that I brought up, right? We'll dissect how functional field of view and orientation interact, transforming sort of this raw sensory input into actionable intelligence, right? And we'll explore how those kind of these concepts help us detect anomalies, assess potential threats, and adapt to ever-changing environments. And it's that adaptation that is going to sort of lead us to the larger sociological discussion we'll have about how these things shape our world and our mind. And then it's kind of like a continuous feedback loop, right?
Right.
So that's sort of the overview, Greg. Why don't you? Well, I'll go to you to kind of start that process in a sense, and I sharpen our focus here since we're starting and talking about orientation and vision and everything, and what this means and how powerful it is.
Yeah. And if you're following at home, break out the yellow pad as long as you're not like driving on the freeway, unless you're the
Yeah.
passenger, and write down what Brian said as the outline, and I'll go in order as much as I can
Well,
and
I
hit
would
it
say
like
just listen to that, but write down what
yeah,
you're going to say because we're going to kind of
yeah.
go down into these if
I
it
don't know if my
interests.
stuff is going to be as memorable as yours. So my overarching theme when Brian and I discussed the topic, I'll open and close with it, and that's that your senses orient your body so that you can collect vital information quicker in order to survive challenging encounters. Now, when I say survive challenging encounters, your brain is constantly switched on to look for danger, warning, Will Robinson. So this is just another function of your daily life, because that's how your life works. You think that all the stuff that you're doing is important in your life. Well, your brain is going, yeah, that's second or tertiary. My survival is the first thing. So that first point that Brian brought up is very, very essential. Understanding that your brain favors organization. What does that mean? That means that organized thoughts and organized artifacts and evidence provide a much simpler encoding of an array of sensory input. So your brain is overwhelmed daily with the amount of sensory input, so it has to have a gating mechanism. It has to have a way to take all of that information and prioritize it and leave some behind. A lot is left behind, as a matter of fact. So sense making gives meaning to our experiences, specifically our collective experiences, so we can share that reality in space-time. So that means sense making helps us organize information from the vast array of environments that we operate in every day, so that we can create meaning and understanding. And our meaning and understanding, the second part of that, can be shared with others, can be shared with kids, can be shared with our
Okay.
boss, can be shared, with the next generation.
Okay, so a lot to just unpack real quick there. Can you
Yeah.
give me sort of like an example of what you mean? Because you're saying it obviously gives meaning to our individual experiences, but
Yep.
then this collective shared experience that we
Right.
can go back. So can you kind of break down what you mean by that? Meaning, like how can my experience shape your
Yeah.
or us as a group? You get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no, that's brilliant, and it's a great question. And let's white belt this. Every culture on the face of the planet has a form of dance. Most dances are associated with wonderful, happy things: the birth of a child, a marriage. But there's other slow dirges that are associated with the movements where somebody has died, and we're paying penance or giving them the honor of remembrance and stuff. Those are different than a person that's having a medical issue and is flopping around on the ground. Although the late
I
60s,
gotcha.
early 70s, okay,
Yeah.
you might not have known the difference immediately.
Okay. Yeah.
But that idea, for example, sleeping is different than death. So what happens is these subtle nuances between these flavors at Baskin Robbins, when it's all just ice cream, help us determine what likely is going to happen next, what environment we're involved in. Is this a survival environment, or are these people in a cafeteria just eating? So what happens is through a veritable panacea of sensory input, our brain has to categorize, organize to make sense of the environment, sense making. And sense making is the essential first step, and decisions. So if you don't have one, like for example, if your brain is unorganized or disorganized, two very different concepts in psychology, you're going to have a harder time sharing your reality, sharing your
Okay.
experiences. And I'm going to listen to you and go, the fuck's wrong with this person, rather than understanding that perhaps your perception is skewed in some manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying right, because I like the dancing analogies, or how we have different ways, because there's so much from our environment. Like we think that we're processing everything or thinking about everything, but really it's like we're taking these cues from our environment, and based on those past experiences, based on what we're taught, we're sort of making these
Yep.
decisions, and this is happening constantly in the background. Like this is how we
Of
navigate
course.
things. So now you're saying is like the shared experiences, now we create those to go like as a shortcut, like, oh, okay, I know
Precisely.
what the tribe means by that. I don't have to spend time thinking. So the dance is a good dance. Something great must have happened as I'm
Yep.
approaching the village. So it's like
And
it's
so
a
that
faster
lines
means of
up
communication.
my exactly, Brian, and that lines up my emotions, memories
Okay.
I might need to go back to. Hey, who was that girl? Is that the daughter of Johnny, or is that Billy's sister? All of those things start flooding in. And that's where organization comes in. If I don't have tabs on my file folder for the big items that are going to be in there, then what I'm doing is I'm searching for meaning and understanding in every nuanced thing that comes across
And
my file.
okay,
And you can't
you
survive
can't
that
do
way.
that. Right. It's too
Yeah.
many mental calories. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that organization, right? And how that works. So I've heard, I've kind of given one when someone's asked me a question, an analogy, and you tell me what you think of this, is
Yeah.
like because we use the term file folders, right? And file folders, to how to categorize things. So if I think about like a computer, when I get my computer, there's a whole bunch of programs and apps and things on there already, just when it's clean right out of the box, right? And before
Right.
I've ever interacted with it, that help it run, it does whatever the F it does in this magical machine that they give me, that I just slowly turn my life over to more and more every single day, right?
Every day.
So-
Right.
But then there's the folders I create to organize information, right? And
Yep.
then there's within those folders there might be some more folders or images or documents or whatever. And now that's how I organize stuff, because
Yep.
that's what the way I use it. And then sometimes it can help me and say, do you want to categorize it this way? Like, meaning, do you want it all in alphabetical order in your desktop, or do you want it by in order of the last time you open the file?
Right.
So meaning there's ones that I control, right, that I chose to categorize in a certain manner. But then there's this underlying sort of operating system that I don't mess with. And in fact, when I get to some of those folders, you ever see some, like, it's like folders with just like letters and numbers and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I have no idea what it means, and I'm not going anywhere near that, because I assume if I
That's why
change
you don't
one,
go to the library.
if I change one letter, like it's
Yeah.
gonna just, my computer's gonna explode or something,
Exactly.
right? But meaning there's the ones we create, right, with these for sense, but then there's ones that are already there, and I have no control over those, Greg, and I have no idea what the hell they do. Now I know they make my computer work, but I can't explain it. I
That's
certainly
the
can't
code.
tell you how that works.
Right, right. But you don't need to. What you need to understand is that there's an overarching cable that's constantly streaming and constantly on in the back of your brain. And I speak in metaphors. Everybody that knows me, I'm straightening it up for you so you don't have to go and spend the next decade studying this stuff. It's this simple. There's a bird, and I've seen a bird on the wire, and I've seen the movie The Bird on the Wire, and I know that there's Mark the Bird Fidrich that used to pitch for the Detroit Tigers, and there's Charlie Bird Parker that's an amazing musician. They're all birds, Brian, but they're very different birds. Okay, so we could go down that line forever. So that's meaning. Okay, the meaning behind the word bird is in the file. So the general file folder might say bird at the top, but then I've got all these a napkin I wrote on, a post-it note, a photo, a
That's
magazine
how
I was reading.
no, that's how I name the different birds that come around our house. There's a hawk that keeps coming by, and I'm like, and I'll be like, hey, that's Ken Harrelson. People are like, what? Who's Ken? He was the announcer for the White Sox. He was Hawk.
That's
and like there's a
amazing.
baseball. And then the crows that keep coming back, right? I go, well,
Yeah.
that's the couple. That's Russell and Cheryl over there. And
That's
then
so funny. But look what you just did. What you did is you put meaning to this sensory input as a manner of encoding. So you have two sides of that. You have meaning and understanding. And everybody that listens to me understands that words are important to me. So meaning is, what does this mean? Understanding means, what can I do with it? How can I pay that information forward? And that's especially meaningful and necessary when we're faced with an ambiguous situation, one side of the coin, or a complex situation, the other side of the coin, or the big coin, which is the challenge that might foment a potential survival situation. You got to remember, an ambiguous environment is just one that I'm not immediately understanding, that I'm going to base myself into. I'm going to be in the oven. Do you get what I'm saying? Using some of the juices, and then after a while, oh shit, that's what this is. Okay, then understanding I'm in the middle of something. That's where situational awareness comes from. What is going on around me? How are they interconnected, if they are interconnected? And what can I use out of that sight, sound, feel, smell to pay it forward to give me an idea of how to decide what to do next? And people, look, we skip over this shit all the time. This is why my fundamental argument, oh my God, it's Christmas. Stop. But my fundamental argument with when we deal with virtual reality, and we've been in the field as long or longer than anybody that I know, especially if we date back to our military stuff that we were doing for Fight JCTD and the underpinnings that surround that. Brian, when we talk about having a 270-degree screen or a 360-degree screen or lifelike or realistic or all that other stuff, look, there's limits to that.
Yeah.
Because the way, if you come up with something that's whiz-bang and wonderful, I'll play it all day long. But that doesn't mean I'm learning from it. And that doesn't mean that the encoding is occurring and that I'm getting meaning and understanding out of it. And this is the central argument. A peer-reviewed is going to say, oh, yeah, it was fun, and I really enjoyed it. And when I came out of there, I was like, man, it's like nothing I've ever done. Well, none of that means that I got meaning or understanding out of that. Do you see? Learning is a very different thing. And so if we're talking about brain favoring organization, and our overarching message today is how you orient towards things as a survival mechanism or a sense-making mechanism, then what we're saying too is we're purists. We go back to the science rather than searching out the next thing. Is that a fair way of saying that without poking somebody?
Well, and that's just people focusing on the wrong things and measuring the wrong
but
things as
meaning
well,
well.
right?
They mean well, Brian.
Yeah,
They really do.
and they never make it up to that. Like this is why no one understands that, or someone wants to argue that, like we say, training changes behavior. I'm looking for an outcome here, and I'm
Yes.
looking for a behavioral change that leads to an organizational outcome. And so, you're looking
Which is
at
very different.
very different than learning.
than
Like it's like,
entertainment.
oh, do you gonna do get a survey for everyone from after, like, when they're on the last day of the course? I'm like, no, I already know what they're gonna say. I don't fucking care. Like, well, isn't that important? Nope. What's important is when I get the call or the email or the text or the reach out a week later and go, dude, you're not going to believe this. I saw exactly that and allowed me to intervene sooner. I didn't do this. Like, that is a
Brian,
change of behavior that changed the outcome of a very dynamic
study
situation.
that shows that training changed the organization, and the change was positive.
But
they were more mindful.
Yeah,
right.
Let's go back. Let's get back to where we're at.
Let's talk about sense making. Sense making involves integrating new information into your existing mental model so that you can decision make. Stop for a minute. Write that down, folks. Sense making. Integrating new incoming information into my existing mental model of the world, of this environment, of today, of this minute, so that I can decision make going forward. And decision making is the necessary precursor to action. So everything that we do is preparing us for that next thing, or time would be meaningless if we don't have a series of events, a long timeline. Then the word time itself, and I like using space-time, the 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time together in that, because that gives us a robust Hoberman, Brian. That gives us the 360 we're really talking about.
So, and this is who we use, like, kind of like the file folders terms and mental models, and people have heard the term schema before. That's what we're talking about. I like our definition better because I think it makes more sense and it's easier to understand.
It just feels better. Yeah, I agree
with
you.
It's just easier to understand.
There's a scientific argument that's going to say, though, the brain is not organized in file folders. That's not true. Yeah. We get that argument, but for me to understand this vast, complex series of memories and how I can only access the file folder and the photograph makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, the computer analogy is, okay, there's stuff in there that I don't touch, there's stuff in there that I do touch, and they're all working together, and I'm not fully understand it, but some of it I do understand.
Back there. I don't fully
and it's getting warm right now, you know what I mean? But
in a minute, my microwave opens and my coffee's hot. I don't have to understand it to know that happens.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not radiation, folks. It speeds up the water molecules. But anyway, that was a big scare back then. Well, kind of. Yeah. But so here's the thing. So you just said the sense making involves integrating new information into your existing mental model of the world that you can decision make. So I don't want to get off on a whole sidebar here. Nope. But I do want to address something because I see this come up now, and finally more people realizing there's some stuff on some social media that these different companies or different organizations put out, and they're saying like, hey, cognitive training, if you're trying to, and their example was, if you're doing chess exercises in between something, that's not gonna fucking do anything. It's the same thing as like the Lumosity app and all these brain game things. Like, this is that gets you better at the game that you're playing. That doesn't get you better at decision making or critical thinking or any of those skill sets. And this is what we've been telling people for years. And you'll be able to play that game
on a bus while it's in motion with a person bumping into you.
But that doesn't transfer over to anything else other than that specific thing. But here's
no
why
more
I'm
than
bringing
reading
that
a book, Brian. No more than reading a book or watching a television show. You're exactly right.
So you're saying sense making involves integrating new information into your existing mental model of the world. And we already said that sense making gives us a meaning to our experiences, and we can sort of, and it, not just for us, but shared. So can you sort of modify or enhance someone else's mental models through training?
Yes, of course. And you can share your experiences through storytelling and through training, the proper way of training, so that that person's brain doesn't know they weren't there. That person's brain feels as though they were there at ground zero when you had that experience. And it's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. Greg Williams patented the theory of close enough, dozens of years ago, folks, to show you that your brain doesn't care.
Yeah.
Answered Willis, Brian Willis, I respect you and admire you if you're listening to this. Brian Willis had that great post, okay, and I added to the post a little bit of friction, a little bit of imagination. That's called masturbation. I had to use self-gratification or something because LinkedIn would have thrown me off for 6 months. But the idea is your brain is so powerful that it gets where you're trying to go. And it's actually trying to help you get there, Brian. So when you're listening in class,
no one else is helping me get there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because you shouldn't ask those questions in a McDonald's drive-thru. But the idea is if you're, and you do, if you're sitting there in a classroom and then you're going out to the range and then you're going to the interactive portion of defensive tactics, all of that stuff is magic. But what has to happen is your brain has to assign meaning to it. And the meaning has to be, I understand this so that I can recognize similar situations in the future and apply this answer. So the primary sense-making tools, and you alluded to it at the very beginning, are our sight, our hearing, our touch, our smell, our taste. There is no sixth sense. So if we're trying to cultivate a sixth sense, look, of course you have instinct, okay? But your instincts are something that must be cultivated over time, okay?
Yes.
So
it takes time.
It takes time. So how do you do that? With training. Education is wonderful, but I can't read a book to learn how to ride a bike. At some point, I have to get out and get on the gosh damn bike.
And that for especially a lot of the people that listen to our podcast or this kind of folks that involved with training or anything, that they understand that part. But the thing you said. Well, hang on. You said cognitively close enough, because I brought up that case of that other kind of social media post and the way people talk about the different chess games, because we've come across other folks that have done that as well. But
it's not that it's bad. It's just that your point is wrong.
Well, it'll help you get better at that game, not necessarily at. But the thing that you're learning, that's not the end state. The end state is the real world application. So, and even what these people said, it's like, well, it has to be, your training has to be close to what you're likely to encounter and expect to see, and you want it as close as possible for the best type of the best type of kind of retention of that skill set. But I think people get it wrong when they say that, because then it was like, when you do the military stuff, it's like, all right, we're going to have the fake IDs and the people that speak Arabic and people coming out with legs missing and squirting blood and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, hang on.
Smell of decomposition. And,
right. Some of that may be integral or important. But I want just you to take a second to define a little bit more, because you said we use the term cognitively close enough. So it's not about fooling my prefrontal cortex and my conscious brain. It's about fooling or engaging that unconscious part of it. So it doesn't have to be right. It's like you just said, a little bit of fiction, a little bit of friction, and my brain goes, oh, it's procreation time.
That's great.
It doesn't care.
That's amazing. Exactly right. So look, you know that I go antler hiking every year, and I always take the kids.
Yeah.
And when we go out there, we're in an area that has a high mountain lion population. So the first thing that you start seeing is bleached bones, which is a long time exposure to the environments. Then all of a sudden you see bones that have meat and fur on them. Then you smell decomposition, and immediately your senses are heightened, because your brain is telling you, danger, warning, Will Robinson, we have an apex predator around here. You are now in the home of the predator. You don't have to put a lot of thinking to that, but what we do then is walk backwards and go through all of those artifacts and evidence that led us up to that. And some are visual, some are tactile. Brian, we have to touch them, okay? Some are nose, we have to smell them. And what happens is we fill this robust file folder full of those experiences and say, okay, I smelled the same thing when I was by I-70 searching for antlers, but that was due to a motor vehicle hitting the deer, okay, or elk or whatever animal that was decomposing. But here I noticed that the pieces are separated and the meat is missing, not because of decomposition, but because it's likely been eaten. And you're going, where the fuck are you going in this detailed story about a mountain lion? Because that's how your brain learns. That's how I'm going to be able to take that shared experience and pass it forward to somebody that's never been antler hiking and never encountered a cougar before. So survival means that not just I can get to the finish line, but I can bring my tribe too. And that's why the shared experiences are so essential, right? So our senses allow us to gather information from our environment through all of those different senses. Then the brain processes that information so we can understand, but more important, interpret the environment around us. We can make assumptions about the future and about the rest of the world around us. If this is here, then it probably is the same there. If these are poison here, that's probably the same there. If balled up fists here mean I'm going to be fighting, they're likely. So that's how we learn to use them. And situational awareness is a comparison from the now to the likely future. That's what we have to remember. And we don't use it that way. Science is so important.
And the important thing to highlight about every basically example you just brought up is like these are all very primitive.
Yes.
These are primitive, hardwired. And I actually had someone who's like, I remember hearing this story about this person. I wasn't personally involved in the incident, but I knew right away when someone was telling me, where this woman was like, God, it was this weird smell, and I don't know, just I thought it was like a smelling like burning human flesh, and the person was like, have you ever smelled that before? And they're like, no. And this woman was right, and someone was burning a body. But those are the things where it's like, if you've smelled something like that before, your brain goes, this isn't fucking right, there's something wrong. That's such a primitive, hardwired response to know that this person who was just experienced something that, one, almost no one experiences, and two, never done it before, and kind of already knew what it was. Okay, where did you gain that knowledge from? Meaning, there's all that unconscious stuff happening under the surface that this is what we stick to, and this is what we think is important, because it's far more important than anything else, because it's been around the longest out of anything.
Exactly.
And those primitives, even like you're talking about, like bald fist, like, dude, the terrorist does that. Max does that. He's 17 months old. He gets angry, right? And what does it immediately do? Balls his fist. It's like that's a primitive thing. No one taught him that, right? So it's so the I just want to hit on that, because all of those things, even like you're walking me through the decomposing body and this, and like I can smell it, I can see it, I know what you're talking about. Like, man, I could teach anyone that, and they're gonna get it, and right when they're there. And that's what you mean by those shared experiences, shared file folders, and shared sense making. And so
now go back to that bird analogy, Brian. Now I don't have to say it's a mountain lion or a cougar. It could be a pack of coyotes. It could be in Africa, or it could be in Antarctica with a polar bear. The ideas are sound enough that I can transmit the information, and you can put your personal touch on it and go, oh, I know what he means. I know what she means.
Right.
That's the beauty of the storytelling that goes along with the lived experience, or at least the assumed experience that we get. That's what training gives us. Training can't always give us the real thing, but training can equate. And if the training is cognitively close enough, we're allowed to do the rest. We're allowed to finish.
Your brain will fill in. Your brain will fill in the details.
Rarely will it be wrong. Rarely will it be wrong. When will it be wrong? Shitty training, where physics don't apply. Where somebody says, "Hey, you can shoot the axe and split the bullet and kill both of the terrorists at the same time," and we've all seen that. And it's an example, and somebody's going to write in, but Kit Cody did that. Yeah, he did it one time, and I wasn't there, so I don't believe that shit. But
the one Marine sniper who put one 50 cal Rothus round through a cinder block, and they killed 2 people with it. It's like, okay.
And so now on the range, Brian, they train just that shot. And shut up. So that's the stuff I classify as the behavior-oriented vision, where it could occur, but it's not. Look, so I got to tell you about this call, because it happened at Christmas. So I get a call down to Hinsdale County. Hinsdale County is 90 minutes under ideal circumstances in the winter to get to from where I'm at, and there's no other coppers that can respond to it. And the female's burning up the line, calling dispatch in Gunnison. I don't know if I should go into much more detail than that. Oh. And the call is that, hey, there are deer, specifically mule deer, flying through the neighbor's backyard. Okay, that's great. So how much have you had?
Like Santa Claus, reindeer? Like, it's just,
So there are mule deer flying through my neighbor's yard, and you need to send somebody down here because it's a wild Akashian thing, and now it's drawn a crowd, and the people are wondering what's going on. So I get in the sled. I drive down there. The whole way I'm getting updates from dispatch. There's now 15 people at the scene, and some kids have seen it as well, and all this. So I'm going, okay, prank, gag, mass hysteria. You get what I'm saying? It's a long drive. So I'm going through all the stuff. I get there. It's hours of darkness. I'm standing where the people are standing. standing, and you hear the clomp, 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 clomp associated with the running deer, and then all of a sudden you see the shadow, no shit, of a deer flying against the buildings, and then the next one lines up and goes too. And I'm going,
That's
okay,
hilarious.
this is the greatest animation I've ever seen. What it was is a mule deer buck was walking through a neighborhood backyard and got his antlers caught in the gosh damn clothesline. And there's clotheslines that make like an octagon where they go up like an umbrella upside down, a fan. And so this one was designed so when you're hanging the clothes, you can just move it to the right, spin it around. So when the mule deer buck was going through the backyard, his antlers got stuck and he was running along the aluminum siding of one house, landing back on the ground, running along the wood on the other house, and the light from the Christmas tree lights made it look animated. So there was one after the other deer lining up, running, and flying. Okay, so Brian, because I didn't have a file folder for a effing mule deer, I'm from Detroit, you get what I'm trying to say? And I'd never had a clothesline in my entire life. That was a whole different thing in Detroit. You hung your clothes out, somebody else borrowed it, if you know what I'm saying, and they didn't return it. And I had never seen this, and the mass hysteria was working on me, that visual and perceptual skills that I was bringing in made no sense. I had nothing to compare it against. So finally, I had to talk to a very dear friend, I'm not going to name either, that was at the time the DOW, which is now CPW, and I go, what the hell is going on? And he explained it to me, and we got the deer loose and walked over there, and it was the damnedest thing in the world. And if we had to recreate it, Brian, only Hollywood or Bollywood could probably do that. Computers now, AI might be able to do that, right? But it was the wildest damn thing. So it had the whole community in uproar, it had dispatch in uproar, everybody needed to know what was going on. And because it was before the time of the gosh damn best phone in the world, my little phone for all the cameras and videos, I wasn't able to take a photo to fully show everybody what I was seeing. But guess what? Everybody there now has that one wild-ass explanation. So 9 years from now, in Israel, when a gosh damn goat is caught up in a jump rope and doing the same thing, one of those people will go, well, you know what I saw in Hinsdale County? And now we've solved for X, Brian. That's the beauty of shared information. So the orientation is forced orientation because I was called to the scene. The other type of orientation was functional field of view oriented that you brought up earlier. And there's a miscommunication there too, if I might segue right into that. So when you're standing still and you're looking straight ahead, okay, and you're not moving, your eyes, your saccades, your brain, we can go back through your optic nerve and all that. That's what the op tempo of our course doesn't allow us to go into such great detail. But understand that there's basically 4 levels or 4 stages. Your head's not moving, you're looking straight ahead. Males have a 6-degree functional field of view in this situation. Females, about double that, about 11. And what that means is I can process visual information in my new visual field, this straight ahead, not moving my eyes. Then the second is slight movement of my eyes to track a target with other things that are competing for my attention. Then the third is I have to also move my head, and now I'm moving my head and my eyes. And then the final one is I have to orient my body. I literally have to orient my body. So our brain gives us light, motion, and edges. And then our hardwiring gives us, these are some environmental cues you need to pay attention to because they could call you your life. And between that rich tapestry of knowledge that we're started off with as kids and the stuff that we learn from kids all the way to adult, like catching a ball, throwing a ball at a target, those type of things, what happens is we're able to use behavior-oriented vision, and now we have a mental trigger, whether we acknowledge them or not, that orients us towards potential danger or potential opportunity. It's really simple when you think of it in those terms, right? Because you can see that lining up. But what happens is vision, and if we start reading about it, we get overwhelmed. And next time we're at the optometrist, he slaps us and says, stop, because we're asking so many questions. You don't need to get so detailed to understand the basics of human vision and how to process information visually.
Yeah, and so you hit up on those are big things, is that functional field of view, which is very limited, very small, a lot smaller than what people think. You have strong central vision, and then your peripheral kind of can alert you to things. And then then when we tie that in with orientation. So I think of if, picture you're walking past something. If you ever had that where something caught, the corner of your eye or something like that, and you did like the double take and you turned, and then, oh crap, it was powerful enough for you to turn your whole body and look at that. That's what we mean by that functional field of view and orientation lining up. So what your brain did for you unconsciously is say, hey, there's something going on over here. I don't know what it is. It could fucking kill us.
Yes.
So why don't
Or
you,
thrill us. Right.
or
Right.
or we can eat
Right.
it, whatever,
Exactly.
if you're hungry. But and then it will force it unconsciously, it tells you turn and face that direction, and so you
Yep.
will actually turn and face that direction, so that, just like you said, all of our senses are aligned to the front, which is what we're designed as humans for, forward motion and moving forward, right? And to
Yep.
pick up what that is. Now, it might be nothing, and so think about those things when it was nothing. It was, oh, it was just a cat making noise, so it came over the fence, whatever.
Yep.
When it's nothing, okay, that what that means is that all that stuff is happening underneath, right? And so it's basing it on, so things you've learned in your life, your experience, what you've been told, what you've heard, maybe that ghost story, maybe that boogeyman story, maybe this.
Yeah.
So whether it's real or not, doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction, your brain goes, this is important, we know about something over here. Use all of your senses to figure out what it is. Okay, it's nothing. What that means is, it was at some point your brain determined, and we talk about the brain as sort of a separate thing, because it's really just like your conscious awareness versus unconscious awareness and those things,
Precisely.
right? But we talk about it in this sort of like, there's you and then there's your brain, and your eyes technically evolved from your brain, so they're technically part of it, but
Yep.
we parse those out. But when you do that, all right, what it's saying, it was something was going on over here that is cognitively close enough to some trigger, or some threat arousal trigger, or hunger arousal trigger, whatever it is,
Of course.
that
Of course.
we want to attend to it. We want to attend to it. We want to pay complete attention to it. So when we use those terms, cognitively close enough, that's another example of what we
Yeah.
mean by that. When we say, look, your brain didn't know. It needed an extra second. It needed you to spend a little extra time on this to justify what it was and what it thinks it might be, and to make sure it wasn't something dangerous. So it's cognitively close enough. And so that's a very, very powerful term that we use, that sometimes we don't, because we can't get into everything, and the meaning behind everything and what it is. It's just,
Even on a podcast you can't, Brian. So let's go
we'd be
deeper
on here
in-
all day. Yeah.
Let's go deeper in cognitively close enough. For the purists that are also listening to us. What's shape dependability? Well, shape dependability is when I've seen these shapes in the past, they were always a car. When I saw those shapes in the past, they were always a ball. When I saw those shapes in the past, they were always a horse. So your brain has a file folder that does that autonomically. Form recognition. Hey, that's Collier, the shaved ape. I can tell by the amazing guns he's carrying around and the bald head leaning forward with the 12-inch forehead.
One
You get what
step
I'm saying?
back in
Looking
that
like,
that evolution
the
scale.
Harry and
He's
the
like one.
Henderson, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
We
size
love you,
of an
Eric.
object. We do love you. Size of an object. I've never seen a elephant in a matchbook. So many stories there. Dominance, in other words, the things that I see more than other things. Directionality, the way something is oriented towards or away from me is meaningful. Visual manipulation, that's why we do the Hoberman. We can lift it up mentally and use our visualization and imagination to think of what likely happened. That's what we mean by cognitive close enough. We can go into that. The simple answer on that is we orient based on environmental triggers. That's light, motion, and edges. And why? So that we can take in all this information, the visual input from our eyes and the rest of our senses related to our current situation, our past experiences, whether it's real or learned in training, and then related to the other senses to make sense out of it all. So the whole goal is to plan for action. So you said something I want to bring up, and folks, listen to what I'm saying. Brian brought up about the cat. Okay, I just saw a cat on a fence. So I saw a cat on a fence, and I see the direction it jumps. The next thing I should be thinking is what pushed that cat out of that backyard? Or what's that cat going for? Or has that cat ever been there before? Because intentionality, to me, the intent of seeing that cat is hugely important. There's a burglary going on next door, and the cat was let out accidentally, and it's a house cat, not a local cat. Do you see how the world is full of stories, but we're never going to see them if we're walking around with blinders and we don't take that information processing step? So the most curious people have survival advantage in an environment. And Brian, that's why we teach about curiosity. That's why in class we're talking about how important that phase is, because those companion skills are wonderful, but if you don't have that orientation that gets visual input, the largest field, and to humans now through evolution, the most important field, it's essential to move our functional field of view so our brain can account for our position, the target's position, and then relate them to the nuances of the environment. If we can't do the known unknown against the baseline, then our brain will never be able to go to the right file folder in time. And there's your gosh damn training range guy. There's your training driving instructor. I wish Pablo was on here because he would understand what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
he does.
And
Yeah.
little Joe would understand in terms of defensive tactics, and our shooter friends would understand that. But what happens, Brian, is we also don't spread load that knowledge across all of these fields. We come upon that knowledge, and all of a sudden, oh, look at this new thing. It's been around forever. We just didn't think about the cognitive processing. Our cognitive gym, Brian, has been around for over 2 decades now. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And we feel that it's the right way of taking your training because your visual field isn't enough and your visual acuity isn't enough. I understand that you can see very well, but if you can't process what you're seeing into digestible chunks for your brain, then those perceptions are worthless.
Yeah, and this is that's a lot to sort of unpack, and that's a lot happening. No.
I did a bunch in a row in my mind.
Yeah. But that's how it works, right? And actually, what you're demonstrating here is the ability to we got to go back to my computer analogy here, is just to use all of your file folders more effectively, right?
Agreed.
So because your brain basically has unlimited memory. However, our recall isn't always that great, or if I don't link those things together, if everything I learn is if I always have separate file folders on my desktop on my computer and they never interact and I don't draw from multiple ones, then they stay sort of siloed in these areas and I can't access them. The idea is, because how your brain can make neural connections is it can connect all of those together, right? It can create, it can create a neural network in a sense that accesses all of that. And then you can get better at priming it for certain things. Like, it's just like, so I have a Mac and it has the iCloud. So what it does is if I don't open certain folders or files for a while, it goes, okay, you're not using this. I'm going to upload this to the iCloud. You don't need it on your physical computer because you haven't accessed this thing in a year. So it's just wasted space. Right. Now if I go to it and I'm searching something I need it's got to download that real quick for a second. And then I can open up that Word document or whatever it was from a year ago. Right. It's kind of like that in a sense. But if I want that all on my desktop, but just the most relevant ones are going to be right there at the front. They're going to be top of mind. They're going to be, and that might be contextually based, right? So that the things I need top of mind for my family coming into town for the holidays is different than I need them for a surveillance mission.
Buy frozen peas to cover your bruised eye when your dad gives you a black eye. Those type of things. Exactly.
No, he's a lover, not a fighter anymore because he can't fight. He's too old. So he's now transitioned to that next phase of, oh no, we're all good and we had a great time, and I was a great father and I taught you to be a great father.
Don't you remember that? Exactly.
Oh, that's a different thing about memory. So you see how that gets switched around. You're like, me and my brother look at each other like, we were there. That's not what happened at all. But anyway, so I'm going back to that for recall and orientation, big picture. Now I think we kind of covered sort of that tactical micro level of functional field of view and orientation, recognition, and anticipation, and how those things work. Now, there's a lot of detail that we can go into about all those things, but let's kind of go from now sort of the so what of all of this and the larger picture of how significant orientation is, and what we mean it just not now like, hey, I walk past something, I hear a noise, I turn and orient. What does that mean then to that next step sociologically? Because we covered it about sharing things. You know what I'm saying?
So let's save a life first to make sure people are still attending to us. So let's save a life right now by saying this. The fovea is called fovea because that means pit in Latin. And it's a little divot at the back of your eye that takes all of that chunked information and throws it back to our brain. So what? So if you understand foveal vision, and you understand that your functional field of view is about 6 degrees, then what you understand is those things that are right in front of you are the most important to your brain. And then that goes to central vision, then that goes to peripheral vision. So from the most important to the least important. So what? So functional field of view helps us do stuff like reading. Well, reading wasn't survival based when we were kids. It had another purpose. So we had to learn that over time. So what? So if you read from left to right, like I read, then when you want to look at your environment, you should look from right to left, because that's contrary to the way that your brain has been tested and trained. And that means it'll be nuanced. So it'll be easier to find an anomaly. What's that mean? That when you're doing your 5 and 25s with your bino, go from right to left. Now, if you're from Israel or Russia, you may have to change that and do it the exact opposite. But if you understand that principle, that small of a principle, that's cognitively linking this information about the functional field of view to how you can use that to survive in an environment, Brian. And you know what? If there's a sniper school that's teaching that, good on you. But if hunters aren't teaching that to their kids, or if that's not an NRA course somewhere, then they're failing to tie some of those file folders together like you were talking about. It's there for a reason. So the historical reason, the survival reason is the most important. So understanding your functional field of view is crucial for you to assess potential anomalies within your visual field. And specifically in situations where you need to quickly identify objects, whether that's survival or opportunistic, or you're navigating a complex in extremis environment. Potential danger. The ice is thinner out there. You get what I'm trying to say? And Brian, you know me, I classify survival as one thing and danger as an all-encompassing thing, because we don't know what that danger might be. It might be a long-term danger from smoking, which is different from immediate survival,
an immediate,
right? But when I refer to that, I'm saying that if we understand that the functional field of view, just like the fovea centralis, just like every other component in our eye, is put there for a very specific reason, and we can go into detail and rebuild it and show it and, flash light against it and talk rods and cones. But the base level of it is, if you understand that orientation forces my functional field of view to the unknown. Why? Because it may have meaning, and that meaning may help me make a decision in a very, very important danger or survival situation or opportunity. And I always put opportunity last. I don't want to miss opportunity.
Yeah, and it's searching for an answer and a reasonable explanation for everything. Yep. And if it doesn't quite have one, it'll jump to whatever the closest thing is that I've heard or
even if
seen.
it's wrong. Even if it's wrong, you're exactly right.
It's a lot of UFO sightings could be classified as that.
There were deer flying in the yard on Christmas. They were lining up, Brian, and jumping off the stage and flying.
What's happening, right now on the eastern seaboard, and especially New Jersey and everywhere. Yep. I was having some hilarious conversations with some other folks about it, and it's everyone wants to come up with wild stories. It's usually the simplest thing.
But if you don't tell me, then my mind will create the reality. If I don't have a story for it, then my mind will create. As a matter of fact, if you go back to most stories, they'll either have that's why some people go, oh, it's folklore. Yeah, I get folklore, but folklore came from somewhere. It was to teach a message. Aesop's fables were to teach us how to do something better. Look, have you ever watched, what's that gosh damn show? Shelley liked it with Sheldon and the blonde girl and all his scientist buddies.
The Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang thing. Yeah, okay. So I love Sheldon on Big Bang. When I get a chance to watch it, and I love the reruns because it's very well written. What happens is Sheldon doesn't understand the sociological implications of being Sheldon. So it's always creating an uncomfortable situation that he goes into, and he says things that are on his mind when he shouldn't, and he does things that seem off-putting to others and stuff. If you want to understand what your brain is like without the context and relevance of functional field of view and orientation, of sense-making and decision-making, watch that show. Just one episode, and you'll get it right away. Just follow Sheldon.
I see you're really connecting with this character Sheldon, Greg. Is there any reasons?
Shut up. Gosh damn it. Yeah, I connect with a lot of things that don't have sex very often and are deep thinkers that nobody understands. You bastard. So that's I was in Pomona. No, but but you get it. I totally understand. I associate with that. Look, there are times that I come into a room and I know I'm the one that's off-putting, only because what I'm trying to do is my form of making sense of an environment isn't
So,
yours. And so I'm
right.
trying to open your aperture by using an alternative methodology that your brain will understand. I'm much more in tune with the primitive brain than I am with, whatever current shit is on the
And
market.
you specifically are doing that sometimes intentionally,
Yeah,
and
deliberately. You're
yeah,
exactly right.
most of the time. But then some of
Look
the
at
time
this
when people
shirt. You don't think this is deliberate? Come on.
you chose, so you chose that. You're telling me
Exactly. It
you
chose
chose to
me.
win. Yeah,
It chose me, right?
so
That's so funny.
it's what was the Tommy Boy where he's like, what's that smell? He's like, oh, that's pine tree, air freshener.
Yeah,
He's like,
exactly.
good. First step is identifying it. Second step is getting rid
Doing
of it.
something, doing something about it. You're exactly right.
so
No, look,
so
look, look. I know I'm an
uh,
acquired taste, but the idea is that the when people think that making an environment busy makes it more challenging to the brain, all you're doing is confusing your survival brain. You don't need all of those external things unless you assign meaning to them. So having the smell of decomposition without giving the halt signal, taking an E and explaining what that means to the brain, and then revisiting that in the future time and time again during a situation that you're trying to prompt somebody for danger. If you don't do it that way, Brian, it's meaningless. And it's a bunch of fidelity that your brain doesn't need. And so it's great, and you'll clap and you'll get the award for, oh my God, look at these, what do they call it? The visual effects and the CGI. Okay. But your brain calls bullshit. And that's why most movies are about an hour and a half too long now. Because, the people go, yeah, I fucking got it. And now it's a protracted fist fight. How come Aquaman can speak to the fishes, but he still resorts to punching somebody? Those type of things. And
yeah.
that's what I want to do with our, Brian, we've known each other for a long time. And what lured you to the training is I was a goofy, ill-dressed, fat guy stumbling around on stage. But there were 3 out of the 5 things that I said you'd never heard before. You conducted your own research, and guess what? It changed the trajectory of your life. That's what we're trying to do with the podcast. That's what we're doing with our in-person training and with the book, is we're trying to say,
Well,
if you back off the gas pedal for a
yeah,
minute and
yeah.
try to make more sense of your environment, look at how rich and fulfilling your life could be.
Well, that was my first, was like, okay, this guy's hilarious and he's completely full of shit. And no,
Yep.
I know
And
some
you
of
still
what he's.
think that.
And well, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, of course.
That was on my
But
Christmas card. I can show you.
it's Merry Christmas. I still know
Merry
you're full of
Christmas,
shit.
asshole.
And one of
Exactly.
these days I'll be able to prove it. But
Exactly.
but no. And because what to speak to that point, it
Yes.
was that I said these are heavy, complex subjects you're bringing up, and there's no way, especially at that time, my age, or with that experience that I had, it was like, there's no way it's this simple. Like I get where you're going, but no, dude, you can't just say that. You can't just say that. You can't just say this. Like, you can't just put those things together. Those are, very, very heavy, complex subjects that we're kind of still, especially anything with neuroscience and the brain, and before you even get to
And it's
psychology,
all still new. You know that.
it's
all
right,
still new
right.
and
We're
evolving.
still, we don't
Yeah.
we don't fully understand how the brain works. We kind of, I don't know how far in we are with it. It's like the same thing with, like, the universe. It's like, well, here's some things we know. The farther out we go, we're unsure. We don't know. Then it's people like, well, I thought you said the universe started 4 billion. Now you're saying it's 15. It's like, yeah, because we learn new things. I don't fucking know, dude. Like,
And
what we knew in 1960 is yeah. But
Right.
but you
Right.
that was my thing. But what you're really trying to do is tie this back to those primitive signals. Start there. One
That you
primitive
can
pure
use
signal
right now. That you can
Yes.
use. Brian, when you walked out of that class, you did not believe anything I was saying
No.
until you walked out into your environment and you
Yeah,
tried a couple of the things and you said they work. Holy crap, they work. They're oversimplified, but they work. Why do we need to make these concepts so I don't have to understand the internal combustion engine to drive to the 7-Eleven. I don't. And that's my argument. My argument is, when you look out the window, your brain is processing what's out that window. Just because you're sitting on a bunch of books and you got a PhD degree in your fucking pocket doesn't make you any smarter than me. That's the problem with thinking nowadays, is you can convey those ideas and messages to me so I can be as safe as you are in that environment without me having to go and get a college degree.
Well, I don't know where this quote came from, but it's something I heard where it was, the only way to fully understand a theory is to either derive the conclusion yourself or prove it wrong, right? You sort of have to like. I thought that was just a general thing. I was like, man, that kind of makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. It was a pretty profound thing that I'd heard. And so we're getting into so we did you did sort of just explain the internal combustion engine when it comes to orientation, right? So we sort of explained
exactly.
that,
Exactly.
right?
Because now was the time to take more time to understand that your
Yeah,
senses orient your body so you can collect vital information.
No, and that was a
Exactly.
purpose of this. That was a purpose
Yes.
of this. So
Yes.
now so the next part that I kind of want to get into is, okay, got it. We've explained the internal combustion engine. We've explained orientation. So now I'm in the car driving, but I'm not the only one on the road, right? And everyone else is too. So what does this mean sociologically? Because what we don't always choose, or we think we choose what we attend to, but oftentimes it's not. Like I always tell everyone, yes, humans have free will and we have agency, but it's a lot less free will than we think, right? Meaning that the folders, the operating system in that computer have way more control than I do and what I'm setting it up, right?
Yeah.
It just does. It runs it. I think I'm manipulating it and I'm getting better at it. And we're creating tools to maybe help. Like my biggest thing is the new updates and different technology. Everyone wants to come out with some whiz bang shit before we even understand what we already have. So it's like the best ones for me are the ones that allow me to use what I have better. So now like the search function on my computer is way better now. Like I can just type in some words and it'll bring it up. You look at, if you have an iPhone, like with photos now, you can search a word like, I want dogs, and it analyzes photos and it'll give you every photo with a dog in it. You're like, that's fucking powerful. That's way better than trying to think of where I was and I took a photo of that dog and what time it was and what date it was, and I have thousands of photos in there. So that's the idea, and that's almost like what we're talking about with how we approach that
Building
training, because
brain.
I can use that better. So how does these different societal factors sort of play into that orientation, meaning and maybe what are some of the outcomes? So like if we're all talking about something, we don't always know how important it is, right? It feels like whatever's coming out and whatever's happening right now is the most important thing to us, because everything we're egocentric for survival of us and the species, and we think everything is the worst thing ever. But with time, you go on and go, remember that thing everyone was arguing about like 2 years ago? Turns out
not
they're not really that fucking important anymore.
Exactly.
So we can't weigh that out in the moment. So
time is funny.
Part of this discussion is how communication has changed very rapidly in a short amount of time. So let's say over the last 10 years, really rapidly. And then COVID kind of accelerated that in a sense, because then people started adopting some newer technologies at a larger scale. But everyone's fear is, or people talk about it, especially like parents with kids, it's like, oh, this shit's rotting their brain and it's this. And now we're doing... Because sometimes it is, and it can be bad, and they're saying, well, it's rewiring us, it's changing us, and it's like, well, okay, meaning you can find evidence to support that claim, sure, but is this, to me, I'm going like, is this changing the trajectory, or is this a blip on the radar?
Is it changing the moment? Or is it changing
because
the future?
most things become a blip on the radar. Which I love when people go back and bring up quotes from the past and they completely misunderstand them. And, it's like people are quoting or writing some big thing about, Socrates, and he said this. And I'm like, my response is, Socrates would disagree with everything you just said. Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, one, that motherfucker didn't believe in writing things down. He thought that was lazy, and you should be able to memorize everything. So they'd be against your social media posts because you shouldn't be writing it down. You should be able to explain it. It's like
now you're spot on. So let me give you a couple of for instances.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, let's do a couple of for instances along that space time. So the smartest human I know is Shelley. And I don't mean just the smartest female that I know. I mean human. The one that I most admire. She edits a lot of my stuff mentally and physically and verbally, and corrects me when I need correcting.
I was going to say physically.
Physically,
abusive.
exactly. I'm frightened. Yeah, because she beats my ass, and I need it though. But she works in an environment where she sees daily that kids of a certain age come in and have no idea how to sign their own names because they've never been forced to do it, or understand how cursive writing works because it's not been challenged or taught, and therefore it's a lost art form now. Brian, I don't often eat out, but when we're on the road, we kind of have to. We stop at healthy places and grab some stuff for the hotel and then go to a healthy restaurant. And you know, I always carry the pink phone everywhere I go. And the function I think I use most other than photography is my calculator, because I want to leave a nice tip and I don't want to be an idiot, because a teacher taught me a long time ago, move the decimal point and do this and that. I'm from Detroit, man. I don't know how to fucking do any of that. So what I do is I enter the number in and multiply it by the thing, and it tells me what to do. I noticed on Monday it was that I went and got some chow for Shell and I, because it was a very busy day, first time in town in a long time. And I said, oh, I didn't bring my calculator. And the woman said, no problem. Look at the bottom of your receipt. Brian, it had all the different calculations necessary, and all I had to do is tap the one that I wanted. Well, that's just like the cursive writing. The more I have to press a button, like what's your own phone number? What's your dad's phone number? Well, I don't do that because I press dad on my phone. What happens is when we supplant, when we exchange, when we stop using those old methods to make fire, okay, to splint a leg, what happens is the more that we use that app and the more we look at the phone, I can give you one that costs us money. How many times you've been in a light, the light changes, you look left and right to make sure nobody's running the light, and you move forward and there's cars still sitting still. And you look at them and they're all playing Angry Birds or looking down at their phone. That costs tens of millions, if not billions of dollars.
That's billions,
so what happens is those are impacts that we're feeling now. And somebody would point at those and go, so that's changed how humans think.
Here's my argument against that, all right? Because especially because writing is a great one, but writing has not been around very long. And there's still plenty of countries in the world where only 25 to 50% of the people in that country can even write or read.
Exactly. I agree.
So when we make, like, I get what you're saying, and it's following a logical that makes sense. Okay, we're doing this less, so is that going to go away? But is it did that come up and then now going away because because societally we've evolved past the necessity for it, right? You know what I'm saying? And that's what everyone gets into when they try to.
But my argument with you, and it's a continuous argument that we both have, is we don't know, because it's going to take for the least of us, it's going to take 1,000 or 10,000 years to figure out. And for those real big muscle movements, Brian, that have been around with us since birth, it may take longer than our planet has left to decide. So I think both of us would agree, don't jump at a conclusion that's based on what you're seeing today, because it may not be so tomorrow. It may not be so next year, right? But I would say that skillcraft is still important, because those things that we throw out, like reading, cursive writing, might still be essential. We might not see how essential their nature is right now, Brian, but at some time in the near future, we may have to use that, and now we're screwed. You can't just tap a button.
Yeah, and this is what I kind of want to get into with how orientation affects us, right? Because we now sort of at scale, due to the speed of communication and how it's shared quickly, it's sort of this mass orientation together towards something, right? Yeah. It happens sort of at scale larger. So does that mean those changes occur faster because they're happening at scale, or is it just that it captures our attention? But because this is the other thing is with attention and orientation, is that it's sort of it's weird, right? Because I see two sort of opposing things happening, right? So everyone talks about, people have a short attention span now, and everything is these 10-second clips, and you got to hook people in right away, and it's these TikTok videos are only a few seconds long, and let's do micro learning, and let's do this, and it's like, okay, but also some of the most popular things in the world today are podcasts that are 3 fucking hours long. Right. Or people, a new series comes out on Netflix and they drop the whole series, and people binge watch the entire fucking series from start to finish over the course of a weekend. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of attention. And that's not fleeting. That's not a 10-second, that's not coming at you a 10, 30-second clip. So it's weird. It's like we're seeing both. And so it's almost like there's when these things occur, right? These new forms, everything's fast and it's got to be quick and hook people in. It's like there's a deeper sort of drive towards this longer form content and a deeper knowledge and understanding. And people now going, I mean, look at even the latest presidential election. A lot of people are crediting part of the success of Trump and his team was that him and JD Vance were going on these podcasts and they were talking for hours at a time. Because a 5-minute interview, what do you really learn in a 5-minute interview? Unless you're keeping it very specific to one specific policy or one specific stance, like you can only get so much. But over an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, well,
Yeah.
now you get a better understanding of that person and how they think and the way they look at things. And so that was really that's something that's new, right? We haven't had the ability to do that. But if you go back, you can go back to FDR's, fireside chats, every week that he was putting out for the nation and talking and communicating constantly. So it's like there's these two sort of diametrically opposed forms that are out there. So that's the part that's interesting to me when people make these grandiose claims or they say this is where things are heading. We don't know what's going to be important in 5 years. We just
don't know what's going to be important in 5 months. And I'll agree with that. I will tell you this, Brian, you very sound argument, really thought-provoking, and that's what you intended to be provocative, and I agree. I would say this, what is behind the theory of academics? What's behind the theory of higher education? It's to take us and expose us to things that aren't fun, calculus, geometry, because we may have to use those to understand spatially our role in the rest of the world. So the idea is that this nuanced stuff that's coming at us and it's fast and all, for example, most people, let's say most people are just reading the headlights rather than reading the content. Well, then they're going to end up searching for those things that align with their views, which means that they're absenting. Look, some of the best decisions you'll make in your life are after making a bad decision. You learn from those things. So
hopefully.
The idea is, well, that's why it's out there, though, right? So if God and Buddha, Vishnu and Allah knew enough to give us lessons, and that's what the Bible is, that's what the Talmud is, that's exactly what the Quran is a series of lessons, then maybe those are important. Brian, maybe that form of long-form storytelling is important. And what I would say is, let's not drown that baby or throw that baby out with the bath, depending on where you are in the world at this time. Let's make sure that we give it the time that it takes. And when somebody asks what that time is, you know what I say, probably 1.3 years. Am I saying that it's not going to make an impact today or tomorrow? No. It's like Bitcoin. Nobody still understands that, or frangible tokens, or any of the other fungible, rather, tokens. But the idea is that they've already made an impact societally. But is that going to be a long-term lingering impact, or is it going to be that flash in the pan? The term flash in the pan, two things, from gold mining and also from putting gunpowder and making light while you're taking the old daguerreotype photos. That term is still around, while neither of those other things is still around. So we just don't know, Brian. We don't know. And that's why you and I rely on stuff like science and physics that's much more rigid and has stood the test of time, when we fully understand that math has limits. And we understand that things like physics change. And when they change, and everybody acknowledges the change, I'll be the scientist and step up and I'll change my views too.
Yeah. And this is also, when it gets into, everyone's talking about AI this and AI that, and most people aren't even really talking about AI when they say that stuff, or
it's
they're
a theory
using
of AI. Right.
Well,
what they think AI is.
Well, you look at these different tools and things, and like you get these large language models, and I highly suggest everyone use them and get to understand ChatGPT. So then in those things, because you'll understand the limitations, and it's great for going on LinkedIn after you use that stuff for a while, because you can see how much just made up AI material really is on there, and people posting shit, and it's like, oh, you just put this fucking prompt into ChatGPT and you didn't even bother taking out some of the keywords that it always uses or the formatting. You literally just copied and pasted. But that's a different one. But those tools are very good at they have a deep, deep, deep knowledge in one area, whereas humans, we have the ability to reason, and we have like maybe our level or of understanding isn't deep in a lot of areas, but we have a large amount or a wide amount of things that we can learn and understand and conceptualize. So
Yep.
you're interested in sports, you have your job, you have your hobbies, you have your family, you have your this. Each one, because and the more of those things you have and do, like the less sort of expertise you can have in all of them. Well, these different tools now, as most technologies are, it's like this deep level of expertise in one thing. So it can't really conceptualize going from that one thing over into another area like we can as humans, because of the
Right.
whole process we just took an hour to explain, right?
Yes.
Because of everything that we just talked about, that allows us to go into new novel circumstances and not go, I don't know, I wasn't programmed for this. It's like, yeah, you were.
Yes.
And you
You've
can
been
get better
preparing
at your
for this
programming.
your entire effing life. You just didn't know you were. You just didn't know that that's what your brain is organizing things for, is for
And
that unknown.
it's just a very it's based on primitive rules, and if you haven't been taught or learned in some way, whether
Yep.
formally or informally, been trained in something, it's going to fall back on some basic processing and basic rules. And so what we want people to do is understand the basic rules, right? Understand what you can't break, what you can't change, how things are going to be, right? So I have a deep foundational knowledge of that.
Yeah.
And then understand that you have all of these other experiences in life. I don't care if you're 8 years old and that's the only experience you have is at your house and in your neighborhood and going to school. You have lessons that you can draw from. You have
Yes.
experiences that you've had that you can then say, well, this is kind of cognitively close enough to something I've experienced before. What did I use back at that experience that can help me through this one, right? What can I do? So if I'm not unpacking those different experiences, meaning if I go back and do that, it makes my, in a sense, and not for the scientists listening, you understand what I'm saying. I'm oversimplifying it, but like it sort of gets me better at that orientation. It gets me better at the recognition. It gets me better at the sense making. It gets me better at understanding and problem solving, and sort of like helps and increases my functional field of view in a way. You can't physiologically get it bigger, but you can in a sense of knowing what's important to identify, and what's not important is just as good. I mean, even if you just know, all right, I don't know everything here, but I know these things don't matter. Well, you've just
Right.
reduced your cognitive load.
Immensely. Yes.
You've just made your ability to sense make in that environment that much better, that much faster, and that much easier. So whether it's learning something new or learning what you don't have to do and what you have to focus on, it's like it's why we talk about focusing on here's the things that matter, right? Here's the things that we don't know if it matters, but maybe here's interesting, right? Oh, this is past interesting. This is now an anomaly. Wait a minute. There's multiple anomalies here. Hang on. All stop.
Yep. All
What,
stop.
what
Time to orient.
can I grab some time and distance here and figure out the next step and determine likely outcomes based on what I know now? And that all starts with everything we discussed in here today. And
I
then
agree.
it doesn't just happen at that micro level, me individually making my way through the world. It's at that macro level, then how we share that information with others, how it gets processed, how we orient as societally, right? As a family, as a team, what are we orienting towards? Because that you actually you can put a mark on the wall, and you're never you're never going to be 100% right, but you don't have to be. You just have to be more right than you are wrong, right? And we can say, all right, Greg, we're going to orient towards this for today, or this week, or for the company, or for this strategy. This is how we're going to orient things, and from there, your brain can go, all right, if I have a general end state in mind. What do I want the outcome of this situation to be? I can orient towards that ideal outcome, and then work my way towards it. Now, if
I can track my performance with a pen and a yellow pad.
and Greg,
exactly right.
and then if the situation is overwhelmingly forcing me in a different direction, well, now I know, hey, it's not headed towards the most likely outcome. It's
Exactly.
heading towards the most dangerous. It's heading somewhere else. So
Yep.
either A,
And what
I'm
are my
missing
intervention
something.
strategy?
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
What am
That's
I missing?
mitigation. That's
Yeah.
not management. Management is saying, well, it's going to happen. It's inevitable, and I'm going to deal with it. Mitigation is fixing it. It's changing it before
In
it occurs.
stride.
And you're exactly right. In stride, when new and incoming information might not be favorable to the likely outcome. That's it. You hit the nail on the head.
So what? All right. One of the things
Yeah,
you
you
said.
just framed a great question. So what?
No, yeah. What's the so what?
Exactly.
Right. So what's the so what, Greg, of everything we discussed? Because
Okay,
meaning
so I'll give three. I got three gifts.
Okay. I like
got
three.
three
I like the
gifts that
rule
I
of
wrote down.
threes.
So
All
this
right.
is my three Christmas gifts that I'm giving to everybody. Okay. Let's talk instinct and intuition for 10 seconds. Instinct, everybody
Yeah.
has, but it's a
Yeah.
prompt. It's just a push. It's a hey. It's a whisper. You have to do something with it. So it's just a prompt. It's
Well,
not going to save you.
And
You
one of
have
the things
to
they
use
can
it.
one of the things they can do with that, Greg, is go back to one of our previous episodes called instinct versus intuition. So just want to shout that out for us right there.
And so intuition is something learned that we develop over time, but don't make the mistake. Instinct has to be tuned as well. Okay, that's your first gift. Second gift. I got it here somewhere. Brian said learning something new, and I love it. And what I wrote down, learning something old. You want to get better for New Year's?
Yeah.
Go back and pick a concept and go back and deep dive it and find out how much you were off the mark from the muzzle to the target. Find out what your Kentucky windage took over in your brain and how you're not cognitively close enough anymore. So I would call that learning something old. And that'd be a great sound, but I can already see a couple of our friends jumping on that one.
So I want an old priest and a young priest. That's what you're saying.
Well, that's my last furry convention in a nutshell. And the final one, Brian, is what price virtual reality? You know, I constantly bang on virtual reality. That's God punching me in the nose right there for being a wise guy. And what I mean by that is, what was the idea of virtual reality? What's your idea of virtual reality? If you're talking about costing less money and everybody has availability so I can do unlimited practice on my own to get better, that's my idea of virtual reality. If you're making something that's so finely tuned with fidelity and colors and lights and flash, and it's so expensive, I got to take out a loan to buy one for my agency, and I can still only get one person through at a time, that's not virtual reality. It doesn't have to mimic reality identically. What it does is we have mirror neurons for that. What it does is it has to allow me perfect practice or close to perfect correctable practice a number of times for that same low dollar amount. It's got to be cognitively close enough. And once it is, I'll learn. So you take the high price one and you take a low price one. And if the low price one gives the same outcomes, Brian, I will opt for the low price one every time. That's my 2 cents. That's what grinds my gears.
You know what grinds my gears?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the key word there is outcomes.
Yep.
We are not, as humans, we don't fully understand outcomes. We make decisions based off of actions, not outcomes.
Yep.
Right? Meaning we look at what actions are happening or what actions I need to take, and maybe that's tied to some intent or some motive too, in a sense. But we don't always take into account outcomes. And this is what I was thinking about after our discussion about the whole Luigi Mangione kid who killed the United Healthcare CEO, and the response to all that, right, societally. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with people? Like, okay, because first of all, I get it if you don't care about the guy and you're like, whatever, some dude got smoked, I don't fucking know him. Okay, that's fine. That's actually kind of a normal way to look at things, like, in a sense, like, hey, this didn't affect me. Like, at least I get that at a primitive level, and it didn't affect your life in any way. But the thing is Luigi Mangione was thinking about him and his world and what he thought and how he interpreted it and said, this is what it is. Because what was the outcome you got there? All right, you didn't you think you changed something? You think you brought attention to something that people didn't already know about? You think it's going to change that because I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen is now every healthcare company, every senior executives, well, I guess they're going to bump up their security, which means that's going to increase their cost. You
Who's
think
going
they're
to
going to
pay
take
for
that out
that?
of their fucking paycheck? No, they're not. They're going
Exactly.
to pass it on to the customers, right? But I compare that to the September 11th tax, Greg. Well, what were the outcomes of that? Changed the fucking world. And did they achieve what they wanted? They didn't care how many people they killed that day. What did they want to do? They want to drag us into a long fucking protracted war and bleed. You know what I mean? Like they got the outcomes they wanted, and so it's I use these examples because they're relevant and people look at them. But I'm like, no. Think about that your individual things, whether it's training or whether it's a situation you're in. It's like the outcome is the most important part. So you may be working really, really hard on something that's very complicated and tough, and you think you're doing really well, but you're focused on the actions that you're performing, not the actual outcomes. The outcome should define what that action is, what the path it is that you take. It's you start there with what is the best way to do this, or what is the outcome that I want. And so if I focus on that, one, I get you back to your training and investment stuff is like one, I obviously get more bang for my buck that way.
Yep.
And it helps me figure out and do the cost benefit analysis of something, of an action that I'm going to take, because it's an investment and that's your time and money. And that's the biggest thing. It's none of this is about money or funding, because there's plenty of it out there. And when people get on board with something, that shit opens up and all of a sudden there's plenty of money for something. And the problem is we spend it all on stuff and not necessarily get any return on that. So it's not about the money, it's about time. And we human beings are lazy, right? We don't want to take the time to plan this out or think this out or recognize the potential spirals of a situation, because that's hard. It's complex,
Of course it is.
right? We don't know everything, right? And something
Burns
can come
calories.
along and change. It, like you said, we don't know I said we don't know what it's going to be in 5 years. You said no, we don't know where it's going to be in 5 months. It's like, yeah, fuck yeah, you're right, because a natural disaster could occur that California breaks off and falls into the ocean, which I'm sure a
Saw
lot
that
of people
movie.
wouldn't care, but
Yeah.
I live here, so I would. um,
No,
but
so
but do you see
you're.
what I'm getting at though?
I do. I do. So let's street it up. One final time before the holidays. Brian, you live in California. Is that true?
Yes.
And you
Are you
understand what a
wait?
rip?
Are you deposing me right
I'm
now?
deposing you, Brian.
I'm not answering any questions without an
Well,
attorney
it's
present.
recorded. You have an attorney coming on Sunday. So what an attorney. So do you understand what a riptide is?
Yes.
So a riptide perfectly explains, folks, look it up if you don't know, what Brian was talking about. If you're in the water during a riptide and you just go through a lot of flapping your arms and kicking your feet, the outcome is you're still going to die. So there's a couple of simple things that you have to do to fight a riptide for the outcome to survive and get back to shore. So all of that motion that you think I'm strong and I'm tough and I'm smart and I'm going to just swim my ass off and I'm likely to get out of this doesn't matter to a riptide. The riptide doesn't know you. So that's the problem that we're facing. What problem are you solving? What are you working towards? And all that work you're doing, it's noble. But if it's not outcome based, we have a specific problem with that. We don't have a general problem with that, because generally we think that everybody is noble and is doing the right thing. But we have a specific problem if it doesn't move the dial. If all of the stuff that you're doing doesn't move the dial, I would say reassess your priorities.
Yeah,
That's
as usual. You're great at streeting it up and giving those sort of
I live
tangible
on the street,
examples.
Brian. This is all a stage
Literally,
behind
that's
me.
a stage.
I'm right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, it's cold. You can see my breath if I turn sideways. I'm outside. It's horrible. It's horrible for the holidays. Poor Lanny. I'm sitting in Lanny's truck right now, recording this.
Oh my god, getting that free Wi-Fi from the McDonald's
Exactly.
across the street. So
Exactly. God, that's our life. You're talking about when a good idea comes around, there's money. Neither Brian and I have money, so we would like
yeah.
some. Please send it.
We got into a lot.
Yeah.
And there's any. God, even some of the concepts. This is the tough part about this, is talking about some of these, and because they're all complex topics that kind of they all interplay with one another. But you can't just learning the or learning the science behind it or understanding the complexity of it doesn't always help me, right? I
Yes.
want to keep things simple, right? And that's why we said, well, what are you trying to achieve here? What's the outcome you want? And are your actions and thoughts and beliefs, are they aligned with that? Because if they're not, then you're never going to get to that outcome, even with the best intentions in mind. You know, so yeah, there's a lot in here. So what I would love is if you're still listening at this point, an hour and 20 minutes in.
You mean me, or do you mean like people listening to us?
People,
it's hilarious. Exactly.
You know,
That's
is
Dave
you know,
Grossman calling, by the way.
oh God. Oh
I'm
jeez,
just stirring
don't.
the pot,
Why
man.
you
Go
gotta
ahead.
why you gotta throw that flashbang into the
Christmas.
room? So you know, reach out with questions,
Yeah.
comments, ask us about it. I know our Patreon folks will always get to you first,
Yeah.
and we can have a further on discussions on there. But any of these things, you know, I to pick it apart and go, what the hell did you mean by this, or why are you saying it this way, or what is that? Because that's how we can really parse out some of these details for some of you who are really interested in it. If you're not interested in it, you're not listening at this point, so I don't care. But you reach out to us so we can answer those questions and we get on here and talk about it. That's the thing I would ask. And then also, you know, have a safe and wonderful Christmas and New Year and holidays, all that too, because this could be a contentious time for some people and families and travel and
Brian
all that
is
stuff.
talking about himself right now and his family coming in. The clamp
No,
at the landing soon.
My coping mechanisms are alcohol, so
Exactly.
I'm fine, right? I know that, you know, I can just have some drinks. My family isn't the one getting up and doing the 5K turkey trot on Thanksgiving. You know, that's not us. That's not how we do things. So
What Brian is telling you, folks, is he sets his expectations very low, and he
Yeah.
always accomplishes them. You know,
Oh, the
when
only
it's
thing I
that
do
low.
is I just try to take as much off of my wife's plate as possible, and I
smart.
try to do as much as I can and let her actually relax for the holidays. I'm literally like, I'm cooking every meal. I'll get this. I'll take my parents around.
It's a
I'll do
survival
that. Like
strategy.
you
Yeah.
do, you do you, boo. And you hang out. You watch your Real Housewives of whatever. Take care of Max. I'll take care of this situation, and we'll divide and
That's
conquer.
smart thinking,
So,
buddy. You're the elf on the shelf for that one.
well, it's self-preservation, really.
It
is
is,
what
yeah.
it is. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it, Greg. You know, appreciate you giving the explanations and talk about this one. This is the interesting ones for me. I know that I like getting into, but it doesn't always translate well sometimes to the audience or to people listening. You know, it's always hard to tell, you know, what part they want to glam onto. So I appreciate you breaking this stuff down in the way you did.
Thanks,
so, any final words, Greg?
Yeah, real quick, and you know all the Merry Christmas, Happy New Year stuff that Brian said, but the person in your life, and that may or may not be you, that can collect vital information more quickly is the one that's likely to survive and prosper during a challenging encounter. Replay that a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's all about information. And so orientation is a prompt to gather better information more quickly. That's what this episode's been about.
Yeah. It was great final words. I appreciate it. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We do appreciate it. If you joined the episode, please share it with a friend. You know, give us a thumbs up. Give us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Reach out to us, connect. We appreciate it. You know, always hit us up on LinkedIn is actually a good one for that. Besides all the other 95% of the shit that's on there is fucking junk. But well, it's gotten pretty bad.
I don't feel bad about
lately.
Grossman now. Go on.
It's gotten pretty bad recently. But anyway, we thank everyone for tuning in, and don't forget that training changes behavior.